Good evening. This is Father James, James Neal here. I'm in Enid, Oklahoma. I am a parish priest to the Orthodox Catholic Church, but I am also I have a secular life. I have a job outside of the church. I am a veteran, and this is Veterans Day. And I wanted to spend some time this evening just talking about the way our country historically has, and now definitely is, um, just saying F you to its veterans. Um, and it is poignant to this time after this election, but there's more to it than that, and it goes way back beyond last week. And I want to get into that a little bit. But I wanted to share just a little bit about me for those of you who don't know me and kind of know my background. This is my reference for this naive little bastard there. Grew up 5 years old, told my parents that I was going to go to the Naval Academy and I was going to be a naval officer and I was going to serve my country and make the world safe for democracy and all that. And that was my singular focus from the time I was 5 until I went to the Naval Academy, went into the fleet, and went and served in combat, if you could call it combat. I was on a ship, but went and served through the opening phase of the war in Iraq. So I am a veteran. And so this day, this question of Veterans Day does hold a lot of meaning for me. Growing up, knowing from the time I was 5 that I was going to go to the Naval Academy one way or another, I was going to serve in the military, I was extremely naive. I bought into every bit of the mythology, the propaganda that surrounds our country, or what it was then, and our military, and the reasons for which we go to war. And that bright, shiny little bastard there in his shiny white uniform went off to the opening phase of the war in Iraq. And my job was to blow shit up. I was a coordinator for Tomahawk missile strikes, and we blew a lot of shit up. And in all of those things, all those buildings and whatnot that we were blowing up, were a lot of people. Not all of the buildings, but some of them. And I helped put about 300 1,000-pound titanium encased warheads into buildings in crowded cities in the middle of the night. Needless to say, some people who didn't need to die died because, in part, of the actions that I took, but as a whole, because of the actions that we took as a country. Fast forward a little bit, it becomes apparent to everybody and to the world that the premise for us going into that war was complete bullshit. And my life went into a really steep downward spiral at that point. Because I had been so idealistic, because I had been so caught up in the notion that we were the good guys and that we were going to make the world safe for democracy, that we were protecting freedom, we were protecting America. And honestly, looking back on it, and how fucking stupid, blowing up one of Saddam Hussein's sex palaces in Baghdad or a hospital in Tikrit didn't make anybody safer. It made us less safe. But the big thing for me was that these people died. And I wasn't naive of the fact of what happens in war. I knew very much that when I put that uniform on, I was signing up to, upon the orders of a democratically elected government, to go and to kill people and to break things in the name of the Republic. So I knew that that's what we were talking about. Why I went into this horrible downward spiral was because of the realization that I had helped kill all these people for no good reason. And then not long after that, it became apparent that I had been exposed to some chemicals, did quite a bit of drinking jet fuel. The water on our ship was contaminated, as it turned out. And I started developing um, neurological disorders that persist to this day. So that's me in a nutshell. Naive kid puts on the shiny white uniform, goes and helps and kills a bunch of brown people who didn't need to die, and then gets fucked in the head, literally, and then also figuratively. So that's me. So that every day around every year on this day, November 11th, the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th hour. It was the armistice. It was the end of World War I that we turned into Veterans Day. But every year on this day, I get fed up, frankly, with all of the rah patriotism stuff. I do, because it doesn't serve our veterans. All it does is sugarcoat what our veterans have been through and how we as a country treat them. And I want to get to Project 2025 in this election and where things are going from here. But it would be inappropriate to go there without first really giving a nod to where we've been historically. And this is another one of those things where every Veterans Day, since my eyes were kind of ripped open after the war, I realized that our country has a long, inglorious history of treating veterans just like dog shit. And it goes all the way back to the beginning, but particularly in the 20th century. And I've got a couple of pictures there. One is troops that are being used as guinea pigs in nuclear testing. The second one is Agent Orange, that was dropped without any care for the consequences on our troops in Vietnam. It affected everyone. Sailors on ships offshore were pulling it into their ships in their drinking water, and they were drinking the shit. That, I think we could all acknowledge, is pretty horrible. But the effects of that long term were never really studied, were never really acknowledged, were never really reined in at all, because the government was doing its best to not provide benefits to the hundreds of thousands of men and women who were sick because of not just these two things, but also all sorts of chemical testing that was done on troops in the 40s and 50s, all the way through burn pits in the Gulf War. And we've had this long, unspoken understanding that if you deny them benefits long enough, they'll just fucking die. And then you don't have to deal with them. And to claim that that's not the case is asinine. We've seen it in our Congress's inaction on caring for these veterans. We've seen it anecdotally. Probably most of you have seen it in your families. When I was still a journalist, I had the honor to work with a couple of men. One had been one of the troops who was put in a trench and had the nuclear bombs, set off over top of them, the atomic bombs. And he became sick in his 20s, and he came in, we were sitting down talking, and he showed me, he pulled his sleeves up and showed me his arms. And his arms were just a collection of pitted sores, because he would get these cancerous growths that would come up. And being a good, self-reliant, hardy Okie, he would go out into the shop with a soldering iron, and he would dig those out of his own flesh, because it was too hard to deal with the VA to go and try and get these things taken care of. he had had a leg injury and was decades trying to get lifts in one of his shoes so that he could walk straight. And so when he started getting all of these cancers on his arms, he just went out into the shop with a soldering iron and just dug them out of there. And no surprise, he has since passed. He was trying to get benefits, and this was would have been about 2015. So this was a good 70 years after they had tested nuclear weapons on him and all of his comrades that were put out there as little green guinea pigs to be tested upon. I had worked with a number of other veterans, men who had served in the Navy in Vietnam, and go back to what I was talking about the ground troops were denied benefits and treatment for a long time, but then eventually they gave them treatment because it was impossible to ignore the fact that they sprayed this shit directly on top of them, and they got cancer and they were dying. But even then, they refused to give benefits and treatment to sailors in the Navy who were in the harbors, in the ports. The water that they were getting was sourced from these places where they were spraying all of this stuff. And then it was concentrated and they were drinking it. And they were getting all of these cancers and illnesses just as much as the ground troops. And so I worked with him, and he also had a lot of health issues, very strong, proud, Okie. And he was dying and has since died without ever getting benefits. Some of those guys have, but it's still a colossal battle to try and get any kind of benefits for the illnesses that they got from our government, from the treatment that they did not receive, and from the direct risk that they were put in for all kinds of cancers and horrible maladies because of the stuff our government was doing to them, testing these things on them, using them as guinea pigs. They estimate that more than 300,000 U.S. troops have died because of Agent Orange. That's 5 times more than the number whose names are on that wall. Think of going to the Vietnam Memorial and walking down that incredibly long, just overwhelming black wall of names. You would have to make that 5 or almost 6 times as long to include the names of all of the men and women who came home and died from cancer because of Agent Orange. Think of everything you've ever thought of Vietnam, and then realize that our government killed 5 times as many of our own guys as the enemy did, and fought tooth and nail to not take care of them. That's what I think of on Veterans Day, and it pisses me off every year. And this year, I'm sharing it with you all. I wanted to show you it's just a little bit hard to read, but if you look at this, we said about 300,000 people died from cancer and health complications due to Agent Orange. About another 150 to 155,000, they best guesstimate, because we refused to study it, because to study it, you've got to acknowledge it, right? But best guesstimates are at about 155,000 troops later died from cancer and other ailments due to nuclear testing. So that's 455,000 young men and women who died because of what our government did to them, not because they were shot by a German or a Japanese soldier or the Viet Cong or the NVA or any of that, but because of the shit that our government did to them. That 455,000, if you put that in there, that bar graph is the number of casualties per conflict that we've been in. The top one, the one that is the most, is the Civil War, and then the second highest one is World War II. If you counted up the number of American kids who went on to die from cancer and other ailments due to unethical testing on them by our government, 455,000, it would make it, just from Agent Orange and nuclear testing, would make it the costliest, the highest, the second highest death toll in our entire history of combat. Our government killed more people than the Germans and Japanese did combined in World War II. Comes close to all of the killing that we did on ourselves in the Civil War. And if you start at World War II and you start adding up every other conflict on that bar graph, you can add every single one of them up. And it's right around or less than the number of troops that died because of nuclear, Agent Orange, or other chemical testing done on them during the 20th century. So before we even get into, current events, this is what I've carried with me on Veterans Day every year. And it pisses me off every time I have to see some, searching for words, but some politician who's never worn a uniform in their life go out and rah and wave the flag and talk about how much we love and honor our veterans. And they never acknowledge this, let alone do anything about it. They will give speeches and talk about how much they love veterans and let's get out and celebrate Veterans Day and ride on the back of a fire truck and have a fucking hot dog. But they will not acknowledge, let alone do anything about the fact that by body count, the deadliest enemy American soldiers have ever had is the United States government. That's not being hyperbolic. That's not an exaggeration. That's just simple fucking math. The number of young men and women who answered that call and put on the uniform and believed all the same shit I used to believe, the number of them that died by far was more because of what our government did to them than what any enemy did. And Justin Patterson said it's all about photo ops. They don't care about any of us. And unfortunately, Justin, I think that's 100% true. They've got to do lip service to it to get elected and to look good on Veterans Day and Memorial Day and all these other holidays. But when it comes to actually doing something about caring for veterans, the rubber never meets the road. So we have that long history. And then we come up to this past election. And, obviously, Americans had a choice on a whole bunch of issues. And we're going to get into all of them in other segments, and you've heard me rail about women's rights and LGBTQ rights and immigrants and all of these horrible consequences of this election. But for today, I just want to focus on veterans and Veterans Day. Coming into this election, Americans had a 4-year-long empirical study of how this man, our president-elect, thought about and treated veterans. And it was like dog shit. The way he speaks about them, the way he speaks about us, the things that he started to do to dismantle the VA and to turn it into a privatized free-for-all to make profit off of the suffering of people who are already fucked up and broken from combat was criminal. It was just disgusting. And Americans who are out there today waving the flag and eating the hot dogs and going to the parades and all that bullshit chose not just 4 more years of that, but 4 more years or more, likely not to end on its own, of something worse. And this is what people who are in the business of caring for veterans had to say. The nonpartisan group Veterans Healthcare Policy said a second that guy term would decimate veterans' healthcare and benefits. As it analyzed Project 2025 proposals, it added the Heritage Plan aims to finish in a second administration the VA demolition job that was launched in the first one. It's an unconscionable approach to those who've risked their lives for this country. Most of you, I think, that are watching this either served or know someone who served who relies on these benefits. And pretty much everybody, I think, that voted knows a veteran. I mean, we've been in a constant state of combat for the last 20 plus years. And either we're just willfully ignorant, and willful ignorance is just negligence, or we're willing to overlook everything about the reality of what this does to veterans in order to get somebody who hates the same people they hate, or that allowed them to avoid the horror of electing a brown woman. Whatever it was, I don't care. They made the choice to fuck over our veterans. The VA knows it. Veterans do or should know it. Anybody who read what was going into it knows it. And Justin again commented, but they keep telling us that's not real. I think we've got to look at our sources. What are the credible sources? And all of the credible sources that aren't the partisan people involved in this are saying this is going to wreck the VA. This is going to strip veterans of benefits. I am a disabled veteran because of drinking all the jet fuel. I have, on a lot of days, I look like this, right? Like I'm functional, I'm high functioning, I can do a lot of things. Other days, I am a twitching, slobbering mess. And I'm probably going to lose my healthcare and my retirement. At least if they do things the way they say they're going to do them, my family's fucked. Because we live primarily off of my VA healthcare and my retirement benefits. And they have said categorically that because I was not a combat casualty, I'm not considered a combat casualty, just like all those guys that were injured because of Agent Orange or nuclear testing or anything. They were not combat casualties. That they're going to take away benefits for everybody like me, and a lot of people who are far worse off than me, people that are legitimately day in and day out, like not able to function in society, and they're going to strip them of their benefits. And it is truly like we are walking in idiocracy. Yeah, I used to like that movie. I thought it was a funny movie. And it is just, I think we've surpassed it. I thought we had, I forget what the President Camacho, I think Terry Crews played that, but God, we just blew right by that with Hulk Hogan's shenanigans at the Republican convention. But people that are already on benefits, a lot of us are going to lose them. A lot of people are concerned about not even being able to get their benefits because of what Project 2025 states about stripping away and clawing back benefits for our veterans and for other groups. There's a lot of people I love dearly who are currently serving, some of whom are gay. And there's a lot of fear about, are they going to be able to finish their service? Are they going to be able to get their retirement? Or are they just going to be shown the door? That times 1,000 for currently serving or recently retired trans members of the military. There's a lot of justified fear, not just fear mongering like some asshole said recently, but looking at the storm clouds and saying, hey, holy shit, there's a storm coming. And for veterans who rely on benefits, there's a storm coming. And a lot of people who never put on a uniform and who wrap up fascism in the Bible and the flag are going to do irreparable harm to this country's veterans, worse than all the other bullshit that I talked about just a few minutes ago. I wanted to, I put this out earlier today on Facebook, and I had a few people comment, some veterans, some not, but I want to share just a few of their thoughts. Todd, the question was, what are your thoughts on Veterans Day in a post-democratic America? And maybe our dysfunctional form of government that we had before the election will come back. But right now, as they've stated, their intent is that this be a post-democratic country, that white Christian men will say what happens, the right kind of Christian, will say what happens and nobody else gets a say. That's their intent. So when I say a post-democratic America, I'm talking about what does it look like for veterans if they do what they say they're going to do. Todd says, bring back and vote for the rights of everyone, not just the elites of multi-billionaires and church owners. Taking care of veterans means acknowledging that the vast majority of the people who are sent to schlep around in the jungles and deserts of the world carrying a rifle or working in an air base or on a ship or whatever, these are not usually children of privilege. Most of the people, I was an officer, but most of the enlisted are there because they had an opportunity for a better way of life and an education. And they love their country. But they don't get represented when they come back because they're not rich, because they're not able to buy into the oligarchy. And so our veterans, especially the ones that come back really broken up in the head, that end up living on the street, addicted to drugs, trying to self-medicate for the trauma that they've suffered or commit suicide, they're never equally represented. It is yet another way in which America says F you to its veterans. So Todd, I appreciate that. Kim says, my father was in the Navy during World War II. He came back very fucked up and had a nervous breakdown. By the time I was born in 1955, he had recovered but would never talk about what he saw. He eventually talked about it shortly before he died in 1988. He said seeing all those young guys dead just messed him up. He hated how his friends from our small town who were Japanese were treated after the war. He said he knew we had to stop Hitler, but history will repeat itself. He was right. He would be heartbroken to see the state of our country now. Now, obviously, there's tangible loss to be concerned about as veterans, losing rights and benefits and health care and our pensions, all of these things. But I think Kim hit on just one of the greatest FUs to veterans, and it is that we had almost 500,000 Americans die defeating fascism. And they've trotted out a guy who lauds Adolf Hitler, who says he wishes he had generals like Hitler, who flirts with fascism openly, who applauds dictators. He represents everything they died to defeat. And America has just wiped its ass with their memory in putting this person in office. And it's disgusting. And, you know, like I said, Americans been fucking over its veterans for a long time. So I'm not surprised or, you know, particularly taken aback. But it does piss me off when these same people claim to love the veterans. I'm so pro-military, so pro-troops. I love America, God damn it. You just voted to disgrace every single man and woman who's ever worn a uniform. That's pretty inexcusable. One of our good friends, Ash and Riley. Riley has been serving in the military in a number of functions for more than 2 decades. And this is Riley's wife, Ash, talking. Knowing my wife has put in 23 years of service and may not get retirement. It's just another day that reminds me there are people out there that put their lives on the line for us that we just spat on by electing someone that has promised multiple times to rid them of their basic human rights. And this isn't even the first time veterans have encountered putting their lives on the line for people that would rather them just not exist, or that would rather forget about them and their struggles with mental health. Ash's wife, Riley, a very good friend of mine, is a trans woman and somebody who has given more than most to the service of this country. And Ash is absolutely correct that if you voted for Project 2025 and you voted for that person, you've dishonored and spat on all of America's veterans and troops, particularly by saying that one of their number, or many of their number, going beyond just this one particular person, but that these people don't deserve to exist. These are honorably serving members of our military, and you've shat upon them. She goes on, Ash, and says, I'll also add that there are many immigrants that have served this country and those that have died serving this country that aren't U.S. citizens and still have so much trouble becoming citizens. This is one of those dirty little secrets that they don't tell you in school, but you can serve in our military without being a citizen, but it doesn't guarantee you citizenship. I had, when I was a naval officer on the USS Porter, there was a young gunner's mate who, he wasn't in my division, but I worked a lot around him. He was from Egypt, and he was not a citizen yet, desperately wanted to be, and he had served upwards of a decade serving our country, had done more for the United States of America than 95% of its native-born citizens, are probably higher, closer to 98 or 99%. And he had just a never-ending list of hoops that he was supposed to jump through and never attain citizenship. I'm not sure that he ever did. I do know that he went to combat and fought for our country, whatever that means. He went to Iraq and helped kill a bunch of people who didn't need to be killed in the name of our republic. But he still couldn't be a citizen. He was a veteran, a combat veteran of our nation's military, and was not able to get citizenship just because of red tape, not because of any cause, just all of the wickets that jump through. And there's a lot of people like him who have served in our military who are about to be told they're filth, they're garbage, and they need to pack their shit, and we're going to put you in a, what are they calling them now instead of concentration camps, a marshalling area, and we're gonna get rid of you. That's what we do to veterans as well. Finn says the U.S. military is the armed wing of corporate interests. That's been plain for a long time. I will never understand why anyone would sign away their soul to such a corrupt cabal. I guess I'm saying that Veterans Day has never meant a damn thing to me. This was one of those really hard realizations for me that When I went and helped kill a bunch of people who didn't need to die, it wasn't because we were making the world safe for democracy. I didn't help kill them to defend freedom and the American way of life. In a way, I did, because the American way of life is capitalism and greed. And I did go over there and do those things. We all went and did those horrible things, so that people that had Raytheon stock could see it go up a few points. I mean, that's the reality of it. And that was a horrible realization, a very painful realization. And again, it's something that comes back to me on Veterans Day. Beth Waddell, she's married to Jonathan Waddell. Those of you familiar with the Enid area may know them. Wonderful couple, military couple. Jonathan served as a city commissioner here in Enid. Was a very good commissioner before they moved. Two very dedicated patriots, and a couple of faith. And she said, mixed emotions, none of which leave me hopeful. I come from a legacy of loved ones who have served. I was a military brat, married to a retired vet, now mother of three, two of which are currently serving. Knowing what that man has planned and the potential future that lies ahead not only concerns me for the potential that the limited benefits vets and their families do have now could be stripped away, but knowing his intentions to our troops using our troops to deal with enemies from within, the irony. Not to mention, he's already made it clear his thoughts, views, and what he thinks of our POWs and military members. Today, I am holding on to what it is and for my babies who are currently serving, praying for our troops. Strong words, Beth. Thank you. I have a lot of friends, comrades, shipmates from when I was in the Navy that are still serving. And I pray for them and I love them. And it just pisses me off what this country and the leadership that it has chosen, what it thinks of them, how it treats them, the way it manipulates and uses their honor, their names, their integrity for political and financial gain, and then casts them aside like a used tampon. It's just infuriating. So what does that mean for us going forward? For those of us who are veterans, those of us who love veterans, those of us who want our country to stop creating more broken combat veterans, goddammit. I think for me on this day, it is a day to dedicate ourselves to truly caring about our veterans, to truly taking care of them, of pushing back and fighting and resisting and making sure that Project 2025 does not strip them of their benefits. And yes, that is a little bit self-serving, and because that directly affects me and my family. But to fight for that at the same time that we're fighting for the rights and the benefits and the safety of LGBTQ people and women and immigrants and minorities and everybody who is not a white Christian nationalist bootlicking Trumpy. Anybody who refuses to fit into that mold is at risk one way or another. And we're going to have to pull together and put up a fight. And I'm not talking about armed conflict or anything. God help us. I hope it never comes to that. But when I say put up a fight, I mean resist the evil that is upon us and stand by each other and care for each other. And hopefully on the other side of this, create a society that makes a lot fewer combat veterans and cares for the ones that do come back a hell of a lot more. That's a country, the creation of that would make me feel a lot better about what I did in the name of a country that it turns out didn't really give a shit about us or the sacrifices we made or the people that we killed in the name of patriotism. So if you have questions, please let me know. God bless you all. Thank you for bearing with me and listening to me gripe tonight about Veterans Day. I do have a lot of some ideas for other segments coming up. I want to do a post-mortem on the United States of America because I do really think, I talked a lot about this before, that America died for sure when the Supreme Court basically said that the president is a king. So we've been kind of crying over a festering corpse for some time now, but I want to do a post-mortem on the myth of what we thought we had so that we could begin to think about moving forward and building something new and better that actually makes real the best of the mythology that we were sold as kids. Thank you all. And Justin, yes, thank you for adding that. Thank you to all of the veterans. Thank you to everybody who has served. And thank you to all of the spouses, caregivers, and families that stayed at home, and those who put up with our bullshit to this day. Thank you all. Have a good night.